And I have connected to many of them. And there are other people who are tangentially connected to this case as well. And my sources tell me that Lynette was dead before 8 o'clock p.m. Lynette was dead before 8 o'clock p.m., which tells us, again, Brian, you were full of shit. She didn't bounce out of the dinghy at 7:36, which would have been Brian's time.
She was dead before 8:00 p.m. on April 4th. That is not a theory. That is not speculation. That is what my sources are telling me tonight, and it changes everything about the Lynette Hooker case. It means the story Brian Hooker told about his wife bouncing off the back of a dinghy, taking the keys with her, leaving him to drift helplessly for 9 hours. That story is not just shaky. It is impossible. It is a fabrication laid on top of a death that had already happened. And the only question left is why someone would need to fabricate a 9-hour float if his wife had been alive, and well, when they left the Abaco Inn. The answer, when you follow the evidence instead of his words, is devastating. I told you in my last episode that we had broken the news that Lynette made it back to Soulmate. I told you there was evidence of foul play on board, evidence of a fight.
However, if that's the case and they made it back to Soulmate, what did he do? Did he do anything? How did Lynette die? Because with evidence of foul play on board, evidence of a fight, and she's dead before 8, oof.
But I had a gap. I could not tell you when she died. I had the where. I had the circumstances. I did not have the time. Now I do, and it reorders everything. Lynette Hooker was dead before 8:00 p.m. That means by the time the sun finished setting over the Sea of Abaco, she was gone. Brian Hooker's entire account, leaving the inn at 7:30, rounding the corner into allegedly angry seas, losing Lynette overboard around 7:36, collapses into a single inescapable fact: she was already dead. So if you are Brian Hooker, and you know that, you have a problem. You need a story that explains why your wife is missing. You need a scenario that makes you look like a grieving victim of a tragic accident, not a man standing alone on a boat with a dead spouse. And so you invent the float. You invent the keys. You invent the 9-hour drift to Marsh Harbour. You build a fiction so elaborate that it almost feels real, except for one thing. The science doesn't support it. The witnesses don't support it. And now the timeline doesn't support it. Let me walk you through how we got here, because the way this information surfaced is just as important as the information itself. When I first reported that Lynette it back to Soulmate, many of you felt it in your gut. The weather that evening was calm.
And we left the Abaco Inn at 7:30, and then we went around the corner and the seas got angry, my friend, and oh no, she bounced out and took the keys with her, and I was left adrift on the heavy high seas, and we got separated. All a lie. Weather was great. It was calm. It was lovely. All you need to do is just check the marine, or you could just check our video that we have put out on prior episodes of the exact area where he says the seas were so rough and they were calm as glass. And our photographs. We've shown it.
We showed you photographs. The marine forecast was benign. The idea that a former Marine couldn't paddle a dinghy to shore when the bottom was within reach of an oar never sat right, but that was logic. Now we are moving into evidence. My sources, who are connected directly to the investigation, tell me that investigators have established Lynette was dead before 8:00 p.m. I am not yet able to give you the exact minute, but I am told that timeline is solid, built on multiple data points, not a single piece of guesswork.
Everything he's told is a lie. And now, one more lie. She was dead before 8 p.m. That's a fact. My sources are telling me she was dead before 8 p.m. The exact time, can't tell you yet, working on it.
And the moment you accept that timeline, the entire official narrative Brian Hooker gave to Bahamian authorities be call an investigators call an implausible statement. That is a polite way of saying it cannot be true. The dinghy ride, the bounce, the lost keys, the dry bag. None of it happened the way he said, because the person he claims was alive and bouncing was already gone. Now, if Lynette was dead by 8:00 p.m., what does that tell us about the hours that followed? Brian Hooker claims he floated all night and was rescued the next morning. That gave him a window, a long, dark window, where he was alone on Soulmate with a body and a boat full of hiding places.
Where is she? Because she wasn't on Soulmate. At least no one saw her, unless you were hiding her on Soulmate. And there's lots and lots of places on a keelboat, friends. I am a keelboat captain bad one, really lousy at it. But in another life, I captained my own keelboat, 34-foot CNC in Australia for 6 days. And I know that keelboats have so many little cubbies and hideaway lockers. And not all police officers and investigators know about those. I'm just curious. Did Brian put Lynette in one of those lockers while everybody wondered where she was?
I have said this before, and I will say it again because it matters. Keelboats like Soulmate have lockers, cubbies, storage compartments that are not obvious to someone who doesn't know sailboats. I captained a 34-foot keelboat myself. I know the places you can tuck something away, places a cursory search might never find. If you have a body on board and you need time to figure out disposal, those compartments become your solution. You hide her, you wait, you stage the dinghy, you create the float story. And then, when the search is active and everyone is looking out at the water for a woman who went overboard, you have the space to do what you intended to do all along.
He lied about so many things, and I'm about to tell you one more thing he lied about. Timeline. Did he also lie about where she was and where he was? Because there were lots of opportunities for him to maybe get rid of Lynette's body well after we thought the emergency was over. And Lynette was maybe floating out there somewhere. Maybe he killed her, okay, but then where's the body? Where's the body? Is she floating? Was she anchored down? Was she buried on a beach? Or was she in Soulmate, maybe in one of those lockers, hiding?
That is not an accusation. It is a sequence that fits the evidence as it now stands. It is a sequence that fits the timeline as it is now confirmed. And it is a sequence that fits a man who, a year earlier, allegedly told his wife after strangling her into unconsciousness, "I should have finished the job and thrown you overboard." Those are not my words. Those are the words Lynette shared with her mother Darlene and her friend Rachel after an attack she survived. She photographed her bruises. She told people she heard her neck crack. She said her husband regretted not finishing it. You don't get more premeditative than a statement like that, and you don't get to ignore it when the exact thing he described, a wife dead and disposed of at sea, becomes the reality. That statement matters because it is not new. It predates the disappearance by a year. It was documented contemporaneously. And in any courtroom, prior statements indicating a desire to kill someone in a specific manner, followed by that person dying in that specific manner, are what prosecutors call consciousness of a plan.
I think about what Lynette herself said to her friend Rachel and said to her mother Darlene about an attack that she alleges happened at the hands of her husband Brian Hooker. This happened over a year ago. And what Lynette told mom and friend was that Brian had strangled her into unconsciousness, that she had heard her neck crack and had her back thrown up against a part of the sailboat that was really hard. I think the back area where you'd sit outside. And that the next day, when she was packing her stuff to leave, Brian Hooker said to her, and I'll quote, "I should have finished the job and thrown you overboard," is the allegation that Lynette made to her friend and to her mother.
The plan was articulated. The plan was remembered by witnesses.
Contemporaneous reporting about this alleged attack, that this happened, she photographed bruises, saying, "I just don't want this to happen again. This is a reminder to myself. These bruises are a reminder to myself to not let it happen again." But I should have finished the job and thrown you overboard, she says, was the statement that was made to her by her husband the day after this alleged attack. Not, "I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me." Not that. Even that isn't good enough. But "I should have finished the job and thrown you overboard."
And the plan, if the evidence is correct, was executed. I am not saying Brian Hooker killed his wife. I am saying that when you combine her death before 800 p.m. with his fake float, with the foul play evidence on board, with the prior strangulation and his own words about throwing her overboard, you have a constellation of facts that points in one direction. And the Coast Guard Investigative Service sees it too. That is why this is a murder investigation. I want to take a moment to talk about the digital evidence that may have locked down that 800 p.m. timeline. You will recall the photograph we obtained exclusively, the selfie Lynette took at the pool, likely the last picture ever taken of her.
There's something else that is throwing a monkey wrench into this. Do you remember that photo that we got at Drop Dead Serious? Exclusive photo that we found of Lynette taking the final picture we think might exist of her, the selfie. It's a photo of Lynette taking a picture on the far left-hand side of the pool. Brian's over there on the right-hand side of the pool. Witnesses said, people who took the picture, that he looked like he was brooding, skulking, looking into the ocean, looked unhappy and angry. And there's Lynette, apparently who was dancing. So we have a still photo, but the witnesses said when they took the picture, she was dancing by herself, enjoying herself, while Brian's over there brooding on the other side of the pool. And one thing that really stood out, other than those details, which are big, was the watch that she was wearing. Because you can clearly see this powder pink band on her wrist as she's taking that photo. Some people said, what about a tan line? Nope. She didn't have a tan line like that. That's an insane tan line, right?
In that photo, she is wearing a powder pink Apple Watch. Her daughter Carly confirmed that was her watch. Investigators seized an Apple Watch from Soulmate. But here is what I am now hearing. There may have been 2 Apple Watches.
That was an Apple Watch. And her daughter Carly said she had a powder pink Apple Watch. So we imagined that when an Apple Watch was seized on board the boat, oh my God, that must be her Apple Watch. She made it back to the boat. But now we are learning there may have been 2. May have been 2 Apple Watches. And that Apple Watch on her wrist at the pool may still be with her body, which tells me Apple Watches have so much information.
2 watches with the same powder pink band. The one seized from the boat may not be the one she was wearing at the pool. That other watch could still be with her body. And if it is, Apple Watches record heart rate movement falls even when the heart stops. They record the exact moment of death.
They can tell you when you die. They can tell you when your heart stops. They can tell you when you're agitated. All this stuff is recorded. All of it. My heart rate is being recorded right now as we speak. And if I fall on the floor, I get a message saying, are you okay? We detected a hard fall. Should we call 911 for you? Oh my God. The amount of information that her Apple Watch, were it still on her wrist.
They record what happened in the minutes before. If that watch was on her wrist when she died, and if it is recovered, it becomes a silent witness that cannot be cross-examined, cannot be intimidated, cannot be lied to. It just records. The fact that my sources now confidently say she was dead before 8:00 p.m. tells me they have something definitive. It could be that watch.
She could still be wearing it. So Carly, her daughter, told us that she often takes her watch off, puts it on the charger, because it dies really quickly. The battery dies really quickly. But what if that wasn't what she did? What if she kept that watch on? And there's another older powder pink banded Apple Watch on the boat. I know that I have 2 exactly like this, same band and everything, in my desk drawer. Maybe that's the same. Maybe there is a wealth of data on the Apple Watch that she had on, if there are in fact 2. And that's what we're hearing. There may be in fact 2 of the exact same watch.
It could be other onboard systems, Starlink data, Alexa recordings, digital logs from navigation equipment. Modern boats are phoning computers. They leave breadcrumbs. And once you start following those breadcrumbs, the story writes itself in data, not in the words of a man who has already been caught in one colossal lie. This is where I want you to think like an investigator. The official story from Brian Hooker is that they left the Abaco in at 7:30 p.m., but we have a photo of him, exclusive to this channel, walking toward the dinghy dock at exactly 7:00 p.m.
Wow, what a timeline. And speaking of timeline, you know that photo that we also got exclusively here at Drop Dead Serious of Brian Hooker leaving the Abaco Inn, seemingly by himself. He's walking alone, and he is walking towards the beach and then the dock where his dinghy was parked. And we know his dinghy was parked there because we got a picture of it. And we all also have witnesses who said, oh boy, that dinghy beside us was really trashy and messy and dirty. And we have all sorts of witnesses who say, yes, that is exactly how they kept their dinghy. And we can see in the picture, their dinghy is at the dinghy dock. And then we can see in another picture, Brian.
He is alone in that photo. Lynette is not with him.
The witnesses at Abaco Inn told us he was wearing a blue and white patterned shirt. Jim Todd told us when he pulled him off of Marsh Harbour, he was wearing a blue patterned shirt. Other people said it looked like he had a gray tan shirt when he was at Abaco Inn, which makes me wonder if he had 2. I used to have an extra shirt in my dry bag. Whenever I went out in the dinghy, off the sailboat, into land, I would have extra stuff. Because you get splashed all the time in the dinghy, right? Big wave, windy stuff, whatever happens, you get splashed. Somebody goes by, you go over their waves, So maybe he had 2 shirts. I don't know. But that photo at 7 o'clock.
Witnesses at the inn described him as brooding, skulking, angry while Lynette danced by herself on the other side of the pool earlier. So we have a timeline problem even before the 8:00 p.m. death. Could they have left earlier than 7:30? Did he return to the boat, and something happened? I cannot give you that sequence yet, but I can tell you the 7:30 departure is already in doubt.
We are also learning it's possible that Brian and Lynette might have just left right after that. So this whole we left Abaco in at 7:30, doubtful. Maybe a lot earlier.
And if the departure time is a lie, and the dinghy accident is a lie, and the float is a lie, and the weather description is a lie, then what exactly are we supposed to believe? Nothing. We are supposed to believe nothing, he says, and the investigation is treating it exactly that way. I spoke at length with Eric GMP, a retired lead agent from CGI's who worked the Nathan Carman case, a case where a man took his mother out on a boat sank, the mother disappeared, and the son was rescued after 7 days with a story that fell apart under scrutiny. Eric told me that in the Carman case, they never had a smoking gun. They built the case on breadcrumbs, incremental pieces that became cumulative.
I think right up front there was no magic. This was just built. This case and the success of this case was built on partnerships with our local and federal law enforcement, the FBI and the South Kingstown, Rhode Island Police Department, and it was literally interviews, a tremendous amount of examination, computer forensics, reviewing mountains of data.
So tell me about that, because that's really what I'm getting at. Like, what kind of forensics, digital, computer, data, all of that, what kind of forensics did you zero in on that really gave you the smoking gun?
Well, quite honestly, we never had the smoking gun. Again, this was a case. The Carman case was built on breadcrumbs, is how I've always phrased it. It was just incremental pieces of the puzzle that were slowly coming together.
The changing stories, the implausible explanations, the purchases that made no sense. He told me that when you have only one witness on the water, and that witness's story contradicts the physical evidence, you don't need a confession. You need a timeline that cannot be reconciled with innocence. In this case, the timeline is now doing exactly that. The 8:00 p.m. death makes the entire float story not just improbable but physically impossible. You cannot drift 9 hours after an accident if the accident never happened, because the victim was already dead. The lie is the evidence.
I think Brian maybe was trying to create all sorts of scenarios, because he sure spun a big yarn about his wife bouncing off his dinghy, taking the keys with her, and then, oh no, the dry bag's gone, Lynette's gone, and I have no propulsion because I lost one of my oars. Also bullshit. I've been in a dinghy before, and if you can touch the bottom with your oar, which in that area you kind of can, you can just pull yourself to shore, even with big waves. And if you're a former Marine, and he's former, I don't consider somebody with these morals once a Marine, always a Marine.
The fabrication is the confession.
This guy's former. He doesn't display any of the Marine qualities that I know of United States Marine Corps. This guy's a former Marine, and you can't paddle against the waves? I can. I mean, and I'm 5'6", and I'm a girl, and I can do it, but you couldn't save your life. It was all bullshit, and we knew it, and now we know for sure. Now we have the evidence on board to prove it. Foul play on board.
Now, I want to address the obvious counterargument, because I know it will be raised. Could Brian Hooker have been mistaken about the time? Could he have been in shock, traumatized, and simply gotten the sequence wrong? That argument works for small discrepancies. It does not work for inventing a ding accident that never occurred. It does not work for claiming your wife bounced out and took the keys when she was already dead on the boat. It does not work for claiming you had no propulsion and had to float when the entire journey back to the boat never happened in the way you described because the passenger was deceased. That is not a mistake. That is a constructed alibi, And the moment investigators realized the timeline was false, the entire narrative became what Eric GMP would call an implausible explanation. The kind that doesn't just raise suspicion, it forms the foundation of a prosecution. Here is what I want you to do. I want you to compare the two photos we have. The pool selfie with Lynette wearing the watch, and the photo of Brian at 7:00 p.m. walking alone. Think about the gap between those two moments. Think about what happened between the last known sighting of Lynette happy and alive, and the time my sources say she was dead. If you see something I haven't seen, if you notice a detail in those images, in the timeline, in his statements, I want you to leave it in the comments. This is not just me reporting. This is all of us working the puzzle. When you share what you observe, you become part of the pressure that brings the truth to the surface. That is how these cases crack open, not just in labs and interview rooms, but in the collective attention of people who refuse to let the lies stand. There is more forensic work coming. The FBI lab at Quantico has been assisting CGIs. Evidence collected from Soulmate is being analyzed. Digital data from multiple devices is being extracted. In the federal system, they do not rush to arrest. They build the case completely, front-loading the investigation so that when the indictment comes, they are ready for trial within months, not years. That is the process that is unfolding right now. It is quiet, it is methodical, it is relentless, and it does not depend on finding a body. The Carmen case proved that. Eric GMP and his team secured an 8-count federal indictment for murder on the high seas without ever recovering Linda Cardin. They proved the pattern, they proved the lies, they proved the motive. And that is exactly what I believe CGIS is assembling in the Hooker case. The pieces are there. The timeline is now one of the sharpest pieces. Lynette was dead before 8:00 p.m. Everything after that was theater. I do not know when the arrest will happen. I am not going to pretend I do. What I know is that the evidence of foul play on board, the prior strangulation and threat, the fabricated float, and now the confirmed time of death form a sequence that leads to only one logical outcome. The process will take the time it takes because it must be right. These agents are not going to cut corners. They are not going to take shortcuts. They are going to deliver a case that can withstand the hardest cross-examination, and when they do, we will be here to report it. So I am asking you to stay with me. Keep watching, keep questioning, keep sharing what you see, and we are not going anywhere until Lynette Hooker gets the justice she deserves.